Good evening and welcome to the Town of Douglas Planning Board meeting for Thursday, March 24th, 2022. Time is now 7 p.m. First item on the agenda, is anyone here presenting for the Oak Street Solar Project from National Grid?
I'm with Power Engineers, behalf of National Grid.
Okay, did you want to come over and tell the board kind of what you're requesting?
Sure.
Your utility plan update?
Yeah, I'm Chris.
Through the chair, I'm gonna recuse myself.
Okay, thank you.
Did you
I
want
don't really have to.
Did you want to talk about the actual polls, or?
Well, there's something before us.
We're supposed to be getting an update on the polls, and I believe this board needs a vote for the orientation or arrangement of the polls.
Okay, yeah,
According to the special permit.
sure. Where am I going? Is it?
Do you have additional copies?
I don't.
So I think this is separate from the special permit that was issued. It's a poll petition.
Oh, okay.
So it is separate from the special permit, but it is related to the project.
Madam Chair, may I give a background on this?
Please, thank you.
Thank you. So what we have is a poll petition application with the Board of Selectmen meeting in February, I believe. And according to one of our previous approvals, there's a special permit for a scenic road and site plan review for the Oak Street Solar Project. Condition number 50 read that site telephone pole quantity and locations shall be approved by the planning board prior to installation. So the select board voted at their last meeting to send it back to the planning board for our feedback to see if this needs a modification to the scenic road special permit.
Correct. Yes, that's what I recall. Do you guys know the condition that was in that special permit that was granted? Are you aware?
Yeah, I guess I could be wrong. I understood that maybe that was related specifically to the poles on site, but maybe I understood the condition wrong, whereas these poles are not necessarily on site, and while they're related to the project, they're not located on the site of the solar facility.
No?
Just through the chair, are you talking about replacing the poles that are along the Oak Street with taller poles? Correct. Is that what you hear?
So that's what I'm here for.
For the petition?
Yes.
So you're replacing existing poles?
Yes.
With taller poles, nothing to do with the interconnect or the transformer banks on the poles that would be in the site?
Correct.
Right, so you're just talking about replacing the existing poles along Oak Street with taller poles? Okay. Thank you, I just wanted to clarify.
Through the chair, no additional poles. These are replacements.
There are some additional polls.
Well, then
Yes.
that's substantive to this conversation.
Okay.
Mr. Benoit, can I see that paper?
Oh, you don't have
Condition?
this?
I do. I don't have the condition as the reason why they're here. Okay, so you're saying site telephone pole quantity. So you're saying that anything to do with the site?
That's my understanding as it relates to the condition in the special permit.
Yeah.
That if poles on the site as previously approved were changed, that would trigger us to come back to the planning board. And John is with Power Engineers here on behalf of National Grid, and the pole petition doesn't relate to any poles on site.
Okay. Yeah, so are the poles, the site telephone poles, are they planned and confirmed by this board? So you'd have to come back here anyway.
Yeah.
Any poles on the site?
Those have been previously approved as part of the site plan that was previously approved by the special permit. Those are not changing at all. There are, as part of the improvements that are required by National Grid, there are replacement of poles that are off of the site on certain parts of Oak Street that again are not on the solar site, that do require to be replaced in some instances and added in other instances. And my understanding is while this pole petition is related to the solar project, it's somewhat of a parallel path and not explicitly related to the special permit.
Yeah, so the polls on the petition were only for the ones in the public way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
through Madam Chair.
Yeah, just through the chair. A question, how many poles are being taken out? How many poles are being added back in? Because they're all, what's the delta, right?
So we've got, let's see, we've got about 10 poles that are being moved or are new, so that are either are being moved from their original location or are brand new. I can, let me see here.
How
We've
many-
got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 brand new poles.
6 additional brand new.
Yes.
6 additional?
Wow.
And that's because of the wires you guys are putting on there, you have to have shorter distance between the poles?
Yeah, we're running
3-phase.
larger, 3-phase, and so we need to.
So, board, I guess what our question is the scenic road permit that was issued for the project, is this new activity with the new poles triggering a refiling or a modification to the scenic road permit?
It normally wouldn't come to us at all for pole petitions, because it's a scenic road, that's why it's coming before us.
Yeah.
That's the glitch.
I don't really think this condition doesn't really apply.
They would give you the okay, you'd go ahead and do it, but because you're doing it on a scenic road,
Right.
this board has the authority over scenic roads, and that's why they kicked it back to us.
So, Madam Chair, to the gentleman here, looks like there's 6, you said 6 additional locations. I counted 7, but whatever.
Oh, I could have counted wrong.
Yeah, no worries, but there's substantive amount of them on a scenic road, so I would think, I mean, whether we define it as a modification, I'm not sure our whole filing, but we need to have purview, because we don't, we don't understand where it is on the road exactly, and I don't know, I'm just at a loss.
So,
for it.
Mr. Benoit, as far as our scenic road bylaw, utility poles, do they trigger the conditions in that bylaw within the right of way?
Madam Chair, the way I understand this is that the special permit is issued to protect the scenic road, right? In general. I don't go over the bylaw in advance, but I guess my big question here, and this is kind of what came up in the discussion with the select board, was the transformers. And I believe the transformers for these poles are located on the tops of these poles, that's hence why they have to be raised. And the question that was raised by the select board and some folks that were at the hearing was why the transformers can't be located on site. I think that's one of the big concerns here. So that's kind of the question that myself, the building commissioner, are curious about.
Okay, but I think that under the original scenic road permit, the only thing reviewed was site items.
Sure.
Not anything else along the roadway.
Sure. I feel like this condition was put there so when they were ready for that, it could be reviewed by the board.
Okay,
Feels that way. I wasn't
yeah,
there.
so, I mean, specifically calling out site telephone pole quantity, I think this is outside of the approval, unless someone can clarify for me. I think that our bylaw, any activity on a scenic road would need to be reviewed.
I would agree.
But Madam Chair, is that under a modification or under a new filing?
I think it's a new filing
Because it's
because
triggered
it
different.
was never viewed by this board,
Right.
and it wasn't part of the original
Yeah.
permit.
Okay.
Through the chair, question. How many transformers are you adding on in the roadway? Net new.
Net new.
Net new. So you get 6 additional poles, you got 4 currently, is what you're saying, so you're adding 6, which is now 10,
Is
right?
that what JO poll is? What is JO?
JO pole is a joint owned pole with telephone and.
Oh, all right, but that doesn't say where the transformers are. Sorry.
So board, what are we thinking? This is kind of a new activity, not under the original permit that was issued for this project.
Unfortunately, for the
I think
Guys
one,
doing their job, but still.
Yeah.
yeah, if I could ask a question. One of the challenges is, well, this is related to the project that Blue Wave is working on. We don't have any responsibility or direction for the design or the construction. So I guess I'm not sure it's possible for you to ask Blue Wave to apply for this. It's just kind of a gray area. So we, John from Power Engineers as a consultant for National Grid designs this work. National Grid and their contractors would ultimately perform the work. So I'm just trying to figure out how we proceed, because I don't think we, as Blue Wave, could put forth an application, as we're not able to tell National Grid what to do. So just trying to figure out how to proceed.
But through the chair, yeah, this has nothing to do with you. It's National Grid that's petitioning for the poles. And if it's a scenic road, I'm assuming the selectmen kicked it back to us because you need a permit from the planning board to work on a scenic road.
Sure. And just to answer the question before, I don't see any net new transformers. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I know, you know, we don't have jurisdiction over where you put your transformers or anything. We want to know if you're going to be cutting down trees, if you're going to be disturbing any stone walls. Things like that are our concern. What National Grid does and where you put your transformers is up to your engineers and everything, but we just need we need you to file a permit to do the work on the scenic road. That's what
Yeah.
it comes down to.
A paper trail. And the activity is triggering on a scenic road. So we may not have the ability for the look, but still for that specific activity.
There, yeah.
Yeah, so we typically go with whatever is required
Right.
by, your calculations, but as far as those new poles and the repositioning and to make sure that everyone on the street, they live on a scenic road, is aware of the activity.
Sure.
Through Madam Chair. So I think for us as a board to comprehend what you're doing in a visual way, this is an engineer's plan. I mean, I personally would love to see sort of an aerial thing where it shows where this road is going to go to your development. And us to understand, what's being moved. We're going to move this fence, we're going to take down these trees. I hate to tell you that, but I mean, do we need to have purview over what's happening here?
I believe it's a triggering activity
Yeah, no,
for
I
our
believe that
bylaw.
too. But I mean, should we have to do the aerial and tell us what they're doing?
A formal application.
Just an application.
Is there a, you mentioned a formal application, is there a form? And then like a specific requirement for drawings to go along with it, or?
Point of clarification, just for the board. Are we looking for supplemental information to support the existing permit, or are we looking for a new application for the same property?
New application for the
Just for the
roadway,
roadway.
not for the property,
Okay.
not for the site.
Thank you.
That's nothing to do with the property.
Right.
Just to the chair, part of the application that I would add.
So yes, we have that.
How many poles, what we just covered, and then new poles, how many, total poles you're doing, as well as transformers, so that clarifies, because I think a concern would be people on the same road, that you'd be adding a transformer every pole, just.
Right.
That could be clear.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe a
So-
or something.
Yeah, the permit says the site, you're right.
So it would be a new permit, or a new scenic road permit from National Grid for this work?
Correct.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's not a special permit, it's just a permit, scenic road permit. We have Article 5, Section 6 of the Douglas General Bylaws.
Okay. And that would, as far as process, that permit would come from you, and then eventually the poll petition would go back to the select board? Okay, all right,
With our recommendations.
sure, understood. Okay.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
thank
much.
you.
Good
Thank you.
luck. Thanks.
Thank you. Through the chair on that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zwicker is back in action. Mr. Benoit, do you want to take anything else out of order? Okay, next item on the agenda, 7 PM, public hearing continued from March 10th, 2022, CRG Services Management LLC, application for site plan review, 105 and 123 Gilboa Street and 470 Northeast Main Street, possible votes, time is now 7:15 PM. Welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the board. Again, Todd Morey from Deals Associates. Also got our Curtis from CRG with me. And then via Zoom, we have our traffic engineer tonight, so you do not have to me go on and on about traffic. Really good, he's much better at it than I am. Jeffrey Dirk is with us from Vanessa Associates, the gentleman who actually prepared the traffic. So we don't have a lot, the peer review still hasn't come in, but what I would like to do is have Jeffrey give a brief presentation, and then when we were here last time, a couple of the questions and comments that came back were requests for some visuals, what it would look like from Gilboa Street, and then if we could possibly draw a cross-section through it. I've got some of that on a slide deck after Jeffrey gets done, and then we'll do it.
Thank you.
With that being said, how are you doing?
Good evening, and Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, Jeffrey Dirk with Vanessa Associates, the transportation consultants on the project. If it would be available, Madam Chair, if I could share my screen, I have a short presentation.
Yes.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
And thank you again. So I have a short presentation. You had a presentation last time on transportation. I'm not sure I'll be as articulate as the last presenter with respect to, but I'll certainly be able to answer any technical questions relating to our traffic study. So just by way of a high-level summary of the methodology that we undertook, as well as some of the findings of the traffic study itself, or the transportation assessment. So all transportation assessments, they need to really follow a standard protocol, and that protocol is set by the Department of Transportation in Massachusetts. And so we followed that standards, and the first page essentially in that traffic study is my certification that was done in accordance with Mass DOT standards. I slipped up and mentioned that it's a traffic study, it's a transportation study, and that's it's a fine point because I know, we'll have some discussion about truck activities. Obviously, this is a warehouse, and truck activities are related to downtown as well. And so the reason I mention that is because this is a transportation study, so we're looking at all modes of transportation, pedestrians, bicycles, and public transportation services. Those are important in all respects, but they're important as we consider the context of commercial truck activity as well, especially as it relates to your downtown area. So the study does take into consideration those other modes of transportation. Any traffic study that's conducted or has been conducted since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the things that needs to be done is a check against pre-COVID traffic volumes. Pre-COVID conditions are considered before 2019, essentially. And the Department of Transportation has established a protocol that says that they're considering any traffic counts that were done in 2019 as existing conditions. So as we're looking at how any data collection or traffic counts that we collect now during the pandemic, I mean, certainly traffic volumes have increased since the start of the pandemic, but we're still not back to a point where both traffic volumes and travel patterns also, they're not back to the pre-COVID levels. So we are required in this protocol to check any new data that's collected to the pre-COVID conditions. So that was done as a part of this study. The traffic counts that form the basis of our assessment were done in April and October of 2021. The COVID protocol that's used, there was a count station on Route 146 in Uxbridge that collects data 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That count station's been active for over 10 years, so there's a good wealth of data from that count station. And so we're able to use that count station to be able to see what the change in traffic patterns have been since the COVID pandemic had started. In this area, based on that count station, the traffic counts that were done in 2021 Again, they're still not back to the levels that they were at pre-COVID. The adjustment factor is actually 11%. So any traffic counts that were done on or about October or April of last year, so say the middle of the year, the adjustment factor is 11%. So any counts that you do or were done last year, and that we did as part of this assessment, they've been increased by 11% to reflect the impacts on from the COVID pandemic. In terms of the project, you may have heard at the prior presentation, and I apologize if I misspeak, at least from the standpoint of the traffic study, there was not an end user or tenant specific for the warehouse facility. So as we try to develop the traffic characteristics of the project, there's many kinds of warehouse projects, and I know this board has probably seen some. You have your fulfillment center warehouses, you have your last mile facility, warehouse facilities, there's general warehouse, and then within the fulfillment center, there's also different types of fulfillment centers. There's what's known as a sortation facility and a non-sortation facility, and it's those both kind of sound. A sortation facility is basically smaller products that get sorted, broken down, put into, basically grouped into boxes. So if you order from Amazon a bunch of small things, a sortation warehouse takes all of the small products, puts them in a single box, and then as they try to get you to do to limit the number of deliveries to your home, is to group them all in one box. That's what's done at a sortation facility. So it's a lot of small products that all get put together in a single box. A non-sortation facility, it sounds like it's non-sorting of goods. So those are your larger products. So if you have a washer, dryer, microwave, generally something that's about 18 inches square or larger, those are handled in a non-sortation warehouse because they're larger type of products, and those don't get grouped together. Essentially, you order it, it gets put on a truck and gets shipped out to your house. So that's a non-sortation facility. And then, of course, you have the Parcel Hub. So the Parcel Hub facilities are where the little dance are. That's probably a good way to put it. Those are generally smaller type of warehouse facilities that have very large parking lots. So that's one characteristic of those types of facilities. It's a long way of getting to, since we didn't know what the end user of the facility was, we used a type of warehouse that's traffic intensive. And in this case, it was the high cube fulfillment center non-sortation. That type of a warehouse facility is a traffic-intensive use, so that's what's been used for this project. And again, the goal of that really is to make sure we're assessing impacts. We're assessing impacts based on the most traffic-intensive use or the size of building that's proposed for this site itself. So that's the approach that we took in conducting the assessment. When we get to the trip generation, and you may have seen this at the last presentation, we have broken out employee trips and truck trips because, of course, the truck trips are the most noticeable. And truck trips constitute, for this type of facility, it's about 15% of the total traffic, both daily and peak hour, that you'll see generated by the project. It's a little bit less during the evening time period because the truckers, generally trucks do not want to be on the road in the afternoon just because the traffic levels are higher and they don't want to get mixed in with the commuter traffic that's during that time period of the day, so the numbers are actually less during that time period. In terms of the overall impacts of the project was not showing a significant impact in terms of increases in motorist delays and vehicle queuing. I do want to preface that with saying if you're trying to make a left-hand turn from the 146 ramps onto Gilboa Street, that's a very difficult maneuver to make. It certainly becomes more difficult in the future with the other warehouses that we know are taking place on the eastern side of the interchange area that will add traffic to the interchange. So we have included those projects in our analysis. So just in terms of the impact of the project, it generally is about the addition of about 1 to 3 vehicles in queue. So if we're looking at those conditions where those difficult left-hand turn maneuvers, and you experience that today, if you come on, trying to get off those ramps and make a left-hand turn, if there's 5 vehicles in queue today, we're going to add 3 to the back of that queue. And that's basically what the impact of the project would be at those critical locations. There was one location that we identified in the study area that's a high crash location, and that's the North Street to Lower Street intersection. The crash rate at that intersection, and that's a measurement of the number of motor vehicle crashes that are happening at the intersection in relation to the volume of traffic that's going through the intersection. So our analysis basically suggested that the number of crashes that's occurring is disproportionate to the volume of traffic. So we'd expect a lower number of crashes based on the volume of activity that's happening there. So we have focused and have committed to undertake some specific improvements there as a part of this project. It was just slightly above the state average, but just because of that designation, there is some need to do some further evaluation and then implement some specific improvements as a result of that. And then lastly, we did assess lines of sight at the project site driveway intersections to make sure that you could see both approaching the intersection as well as exiting. Because this is a warehouse facility, the sight distance measurements, unlike some projects that may have been presented to you in the town, there's an adjustment that needs to be made to those to reflect the trucks. Trucks, as you know, are very slow moving as they try to exit on the project site, or turning in or turning out. They have a much bigger impact in terms of their distance to be able to brake and stop as they're approaching, and also for accelerating when they're exiting. And so the sight distance measurements are adjusted to account for the slower moving trucks. So we basically increase the time that's required for those vehicles to exit. That also increases the sight distances that are necessary at the driveway. So we've assessed it based on those increased stopping distances that are required. Both driveways meet the requirements. However, you'll see later on in the presentation, our recommendation is that all trucks use the Gilboa Street driveway because the sight lines at that location are much greater than they are at the other end of the project site. That's a recommendation that we made as part of our assessment. So now just kind of digging in a little bit deeper on the study. This slide shows the location of the project here, obviously shown in yellow on the slide. And you can see its relationship between the Hartford Avenue west intersect or roadway to the south. Here's Gilboa Street, and here's the interchange Lackey Dam Road with Route 146. This slide shows the study area that we evaluated as a part of the project. So you can see it's basically the Gilboa Street corridor stretching from just a little bit west of North Street all the way through and including the Route 146 intersection or interchange. And then the Route 16 corridor stretching from basically Bowen Court here all the way through till it goes into Oxbridge, and then channel into West Hartford Street and then across to 146. So it's basically the roadways that bound the project sites to the north and south, and then the major intersections that the vehicles associated with the project will travel to the east and west of the project site. As I mentioned, we did measure both traffic volumes and vehicle travel speeds, pedestrian and bicycle activity in the area. Those measurements were done in April and October of 2021. I described what we had done in terms of the adjustment factors related to COVID. The count station that I mentioned is on 146 in Oxbridge, so it's directly within the study area and certainly is reflective of traffic volumes or changes in traffic volumes and travel patterns that exist in the area. So it's a good location for us to assess any changes that COVID may have resulted in. So just in terms of some of the statistics that we found as a part of our assessment, focusing on Gilboa Street, today it accommodates about 15,000 vehicles per day, a little bit over that. That's two-way traffic over 24 hours on that roadway itself. The peak hour traffic on that roadway, so in the morning, the peak hour occurs between 8 and 9 in the morning. The volume of traffic is just about 10% of the daily number. It's actually a little bit less, about 1,200 vehicles on the roadway. And the majority of that traffic is heading to the 146 interchange and heading in the easterly or northeasterly direction as we look at the slide here. In the evening, the traffic is about the same, but it happens to be flowing the westbound direction. So it's basically everyone commuting, they head towards 146 in the morning to go to work, and then they return in the opposite direction in the evening. So it's basically a perfect commuter flow in terms of how the activity exists along Gilboa Street. One of the things we measure as well is vehicle travel speeds, and that's important because we're looking at sight lines. So we measure the speed of traffic on Gilboa Street over 2 days. So it's about 30,000 vehicles that we measured over a 2-day period. The posted speed limit in the area is 35 miles an hour where the project driveway is located. Most of the traffic, so the majority of the traffic was found to be traveling about 45 miles an hour, actually closer to 46 on that section of road. So it's about 10 to 11 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. I mentioned that because that is critical in terms of how we assess sight lines. So we don't assess sight distances based on the posted speed limit. We assess it based on the speed that people are actually driving. So all of our measurements are based on 46 miles an hour and not based on the posted speed limit of 35 miles an hour. This slide also shows where there are sidewalks and crosswalks. The thing to point out really as we look at the project site is there are no sidewalks that extend to the project site. So there is a short segment on Gilboa Street just to the west of the site, and that gets you to the North Street intersection, and there are crosswalks there. Those are shown in blue on the slide here. And then as you head to the downtown area, the sidewalks pick up as well. So then you basically have sidewalks on North Street and Charles Street extending down to Route 16, and then Route 16 continuing toward the center of town. But there's really no pedestrian facilities to speak of in the vicinity of the site. There's also no public transportation services in this area as well. We look at those modes because we want to be able to see if there's ability for us to have specific amenities at the site so that residents could walk, or employees could walk here, or take a bus or some other public transportation to get here. Unfortunately, those amenities do not exist at the site. So as we're thinking about impacts of the project and we're thinking about potential improvements, at least from this standpoint, it's an auto-centric environment, and so we're looking at impacts based on an auto-centric type of project as we're going through our assessment. So we are required to assess impacts of the project 7 years in the future, and that's a state requirement. The 7-year horizon allows for projects to go through this process that we're going through tonight. To the extent that the board approves the project, it gives us time to be able to build the project. So essentially, it's 2 years for approvals, construction, and then it gives you 5 years of looking at what future conditions may look like. So as we're thinking about improvements related to the project, we're trying to make sure that they do not only work at the time the project's open, they're going to have more life to them so that they'll also work in the future as well. So the future conditions that we've evaluated include 2 components. One of those components is what I was mentioning initially, which is projects in the area. So we work with the town planner to identify specific development projects that may increase traffic in the area that have not yet been constructed. So there were 4 projects that were identified. There's the Blackstone Logistics Center, which is, I want to say, close to somewhere between 600,000 to 700,000 square feet of warehousing space in the area, definitely to the northwest of the project site. There's a warehouse facility off of Lackey Dam Road. I believe that's close to about 1.2 million square feet of space as well in the form of gravel pit. So we reviewed that project. And then there's 2 gas station projects that we were asked to include. One is a Shell station expansion, and the expansion is basically the addition of some additional fuel pumps, so going from 4 pumps to 8 pumps. And then there was a proposed convenience store on Gilboa Street between our site and North Street. That would have, as I said, a convenience store and a gas station associated with that. That has not formally been filed with the town, so we did not have the benefit of traffic volumes associated with it. We did identify that in our study as a future development project. And then the last piece of it is just general traffic growth. No other projects were approved in the town. Generally, traffic volumes would increase anyways, and one of those reasons that I just described it is if you have someone in your household that isn't yet of driving age, within the next 7 years, they may obtain their license, and that likely will add another vehicle to the roadway. So that's the type of activity that would increase traffic volumes independent of development, and that's what is known as general growth, independent of projects. So looking at historic traffic growth in both Uxbridge and Douglas, historically the volumes over the past 10 years, COVID aside, have increased by about a little over 1.2%. So the growth rate of these was 1.5%. So something a little bit higher than what historically has been experienced in the area. So we have those 4 projects that I mentioned, and then that 1.5% growth, and that's compounded annually for a 7-year period. So that's basically taking our existing volumes, adding traffic from those projects, and then growing the volumes 1.5% per year for 7 years. And that's the year 2029 traffic conditions without the project. So that's our no growth condition. So in terms of looking at the project itself, we go the right direction here. This slide shows the traffic characteristics of the project, and I think you saw this at the last presentation. So just looking at it, as I mentioned, this is based on a non-sortation type warehouse facility, which is we look at those 3 various types of warehouse, or 4 various types, which is general warehouse, and then we have the fulfillment center, either a sortation or non-sortation, and then we have the Parcel Hub warehouse. The Parcel Hub warehouse is generally a smaller facility. They're generally somewhere in the 150 to 200,000 square feet. this facility is much larger than that, so it's basically would either be a standard cross-dock type of warehouse facility, or it would fall into either a sortation or non-sortation type of fulfillment center. As we look at the sortation type of fulfillment centers, because you may ask, well, why did you use that facility? Those facilities are generally, the smallest size facilities are about 2 to 3 million square feet, and they range up to about 5 million square feet. They're generally multi-stories. They range anywhere from 3 to 7 stories. And they have a lot of robotics and conveyors in them. And just because of as I mentioned, it's a lot of smaller products that are being picked up on robots, palletized or compartmentalized, and then put on the conveyors and then sent down to be boxed up and shipped out. So the height is to allow for the robotics as well as the conveyors to be put into those facilities. And so those are much larger type of facilities than what's proposed here. This type of facility, a little over 1 million square feet, fits right into the non-sortation type of warehouse. And so when we're looking at those classifications, this classification fits the type of products that's being proposed in terms of size and the layout of the building. And from the standpoint of traffic volumes, it generates more traffic than if we had just run it as a general warehouse facility. So that's why we selected this type of use. So we've broken out the trips in terms of passenger car trips, and that's on the left-hand side, column A. Column B is truck trips, and then column C on the far right is the total number of trips, passenger cars or employees, and truck trips. So the large number that you see at the top of 1996, that's the 24-hour volume of the facility. So if you're looking just for a rough assessment of impacts, that's the number that gets added to the 15,000 vehicles per day. And some of it's going to come out the West Hartford Street side. The majority of it we expect to be coming out the Lower Street. So the 1996 essentially gets added to the 15,000 vehicles that are out there today. And so that's, if you wanted to look at a percent increase, that's what you'd be looking at in terms of percent increase in traffic. During the peak hours, so the morning peak hours, so this is 7 to 8 in the morning, the project will have about 165 vehicle trips. And then during the evening peak hour, so the evening peak hour is 4:45 to 5:45 as we measured in the area. So between 4:45 and 5:45, the project would add 176 vehicle trips. Looking at the center column, that's your truck trips. So what you see is over a 24-hour basis, the project would generate about 254 truck trips, half in, half out, over I say 24 hours, it's however many hours the facility is operating. So that's, again, something for discussion with the planning board. However many hours the facility operates, this is the amount of truck activity that you have based on the size of the facility. And then during those peak hours, so the 7, 8 in the morning, 22 truck trips are expected. And in the evening, again, 4:45 to 5:45, it's 11 truck trips. The truck trips during the peak hours are very small. And the reason for that is generally the trucking activity occurs during the off-peak time periods because the trucks really don't want to get mixed in with the commuter traffic. So they're traveling during the time periods when traffic volumes on the roadways are generally at a lower level. So once we've understood the traffic characteristics of the project, the next thing we do is look at how the project is going to use the roadway network. And truck traffic and employee traffic is much different in terms of its arrival and departure patterns. Truck traffic is more focused and oriented towards the interstate highway system, whereas employee trips are really a function of where you live and how do you get from the place that you live to the project site. So this is the employee trip distribution pattern. This is based on U.S. Census data for persons that are employed in the town of Douglas. So this is, if you're employed in the town of Douglas, we can look at the census data to find out where you live, and then we can take that information and apply it to, if you live in a certain town, how do you get to Douglas, and specifically to this site from those communities. And so that's what this slide here is based on, the numbers that you see here. So you can see about 37% of the trips are oriented to and from the north on 146, so that's towards the Worcester area. We have 3% oriented to and from the northeast towards Uxbridge. 13% is oriented on 146 to and from the south, so towards the Rhode Island area. 13% to and from the west on Gilboa Street. And then we have 34% on Route 16. So that can be coming from Douglas, also from 395 or communities that are to the north and west that may use 395 to come through the area. This slide is the truck trip distribution, and we can talk about this, or I'm sure we'll be more talk about this in a little bit more detail. Given the location of the facility and absent Rhode Island factors, which again, we'll talk about in a minute. This is the expected distribution that we expect for truck traffic. We're right next to the Route 146. We have the benefit of the Route 146 interchange. Our goal and where the trucks should be is 146, and that's how they should be coming to and from the project site. And I think from the standpoint of, the concerns related to truck activity through the downtown area, which should not be happening, our goal really as a part of the project is to restrict the ability and certainly inform the truck drivers that we do not want them traveling on Route 16 through the center of town. And so I think was mentioned in the last meeting, putting appropriate restrictions on the driveway in terms of turn restrictions, no right turn in, no left turn out, and making the trucks go where we want them to go, which is to the 146 interchange. Certainly one thing that can be done as a part of the project. The other thing is making sure the drivers understand that the route to get to this site is through the 146 interchange, and it's not to use Route 116 to get to this site, or Route 16 to get to the site. Truck drivers are given directions to arrive at the facility, and I know we can say that they're not going to follow directions that are shape the path of least resistance to get here. We can certainly try to police that and certainly inform all drivers that what the proper route is to get to the site, and to the extent we have the ability to have penalties or say to those drivers that they're not going to deliver to this facility and if they take those travel routes. I think those are some of the things that we can talk about, because we should not have trucks going through the center of town. We talked about the high crash location on North Street, at Gilboa Street. Route 16 certainly has curves, on it itself and some awkward geometry at some intersections. It's not conducive to increased truck traffic, and I completely agree with that. And I think, our goal is to not increase truck activity and through the center of town. And so to the extent that we can, come up with some measures to be able to do that, I think that's something we must work with the board to come up with some proper conditions, and I can certainly help with that as well. So after we've assessed the impact of the project, we have a series of recommendations that go along with not only the access to the site, but also looking at some of those off-site locations where we did find some deficiencies. So in terms of the access, the site plan that's presented to you basically has all of these recommendations as a part of that. We produced the study in advance of it being filed with you so that we can have the dialogue and make sure the site plan incorporated our recommendations for access and circulation. So the driveways are at least 24 feet wide, and they do accommodate, of course, the large tractor trailers coming into the site. And so because of that, they'll also accommodate an emergency vehicle being able to enter and exit the site. As I mentioned, our recommendation is that Gilboa Street be the primary access or the sole access for trucks, as the lines of the two access points of the property. Within the project site, drive aisles should be at least 23 feet. I believe they're all at least 24 feet. And that 23-foot dimension is to allow for parking maneuvers. If you have a drive aisle that's less than 23 feet and you have a car that's 19 feet long, it's very difficult to get in and out of parking spaces. So that's where the 23-foot dimension comes from. And again, the site plan has at least, I believe, 24-foot drive aisles within the project site. Coming out of the project site, stop sign control. Although the project does generate those traffic lines I mentioned, the nature of the project is really, the activity is shift related. So shift related, meaning that we have employees coming in the morning, they do their work during the day, and then there may be a second shift that's coming in the evening. But between those two shifts, there's not a lot of in and out going on for the driveways themselves. So I mentioned that because we cannot put a traffic signal out of the driveway because we don't generate enough traffic to meet the criteria to install the traffic signal. Stop sign control is sufficient to be able to have safe and efficient access in and out of the project site. So stop signs only on exiting traffic at the project site. The next two recommendations are just compliance with standards, so sign compliance with industry standards, and then of course making sure that we have ADA compliant wheelchair ramps for within the project site for any sidewalks and facilities within the site. And then lastly, making sure that we've got clear lines is making sure that we've got vegetation, any vegetation within the site triangle areas trimmed and maintained so that it's not blocking the sight lines. And then, we're getting out of the winter months hopefully, but any snow piles should not be placed in the area where they will impede sight lines. So this is a recommendation to really make sure that sight lines are maintained in the driveways. So then, in terms of the off-site improvements, so we mentioned that the crash location at Gilboa and North Street, the very first thing that needs to be done before any improvements take place is what's known as a road safety audit. So a road safety audit is, it's a supplement to the traffic study essentially, but it's specifically focused on safety. It involves the town planning department, police, fire, public works, Mass DOT, and the regional planning agency. All of those agencies and entities come together and have a design charrette essentially focused on that intersection to come up with solutions. First, identify what's going on, what does everyone see as the safety issues as it relates to the intersection. As a result of that, recommendations are put forward, and those recommendations are suggestions for improvements at the intersection focused on safety. So that's the first step that needs to take place before improvements are done there because of this high crash rating. And then we've committed to funding that study so that study is taking place. And then as a result of the outcome of that study, as I mentioned, there will be a recommendation for improvements. And we've committed to implementing what's known as the short-term improvements at the locations. So the short-term improvements there are a series of improvements that any one of them is $10,000 or less. And generally, there's a number of short-term improvements. They really deal with sign, pavement markings, and some minor geometric improvements at the intersection. They're called short-term because they can be done relatively quickly. They're also found to be the most significant in terms of crash reduction at locations. And so first is to conduct the road safety audit, which we were paid for. And then the second part of it is, as the outcome of the road safety audit, the short-term recommendations that come out of that are things that we would design and construct subject to any local approvals that we may need to be able to implement those. And then the last off-site improvement is for the Davis Street, so the Route 16 Northeast Main Street intersection. That intersection, the geometry of the intersection is it's a skewed intersection, essentially. It's awkward geometry is probably a good way to put it. So it is in need of some improvements. So what we've committed to undertaking is what's known as a functional design report. And a functional design report looks at geometric conditions of the intersection, looks at traffic operations, and then as a result of that, plans are put forth conceptually that look at how that intersection may be realigned with some improvements that could be made to it to have it function more efficiently, essentially, because it's not a high crash location, but it is a location that's in need of some improvement. So we committed to undertaking that planning level study for that intersection. And then very lastly, and I know I said I'd be brief, a transportation demand management program. We don't have sidewalk facilities, we don't have public transportation, but that doesn't mean that we can't implement measures to try to encourage, carpooling, van pooling, things like that, and also amenities on the site, so that to the extent that we can not have the employees leaving, let's say at lunchtime, if we can provide some opportunities for them to have things within the site so that they don't need to leave, that does reduce the volume of traffic that's associated with the project. So these are a series of measures that will be undertaken as part of the project to really try to reduce the volume of activity that's associated with mostly the employees coming to the project site. So the last slide, the last thing I wanted to show, and maybe this is more appropriate for, conversations. I was, it was nice that I was able to get some feedback from the last meeting, specifically focused on trucks going through down to Douglas area on Route 16. So this slide here, and I know everyone's very familiar with it, this is the locations for the Rhode Island Department of Transportation where they have those truck tolls. And so I think it's this toll here in North Smithfield, and, there are some other ones on 95 and 295. But this activity, there's two locations on 146 that I know everyone's familiar with, where the town of Rhode Island Department of Transportation has those truck tolls in place. And so as we kind of zoom out here.
Sorry, Jeff.
It's not showing up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me see. You know what? I'll stop sharing, and then I'll reshare. I apologize for that. Is that Joe now?
There you go.
Okay, I'm very sorry. So I'll try not to go too far back. So 11 and 12 that you see here, these are the truck toll locations. This is the road that the Department of Transportation now. Those are the 2 truck toll locations on 146. You can see the Massachusetts line here. You know, CC Douglas here. Our warehouse, if I'm doing it correctly, I believe is in this location right here. So if we zoom out, I mean, I think it speaks to what everyone's been talking about, which is that use of 395 to avoid at least these 2 tolls on 146, I think is what the town has been experiencing with trucks getting off and then traveling on Route 16 up in this area, and here's where our warehouse is. So, you know, I show them that because I know, I was fortunate, the benefit of the comments from the last meeting about, you know, that type of activity taking place to avoid these tolls that are on 146 in Rhode Island. So, you know, stop sharing now. You know, our goal really is we do not want trucks traveling through downtown Douglas. I mean, it's not an area that should have trucks. You mentioned some of the geometric improvements that we were talking about at that one intersection. The road's not designed for, you know, through trucking. The through trucking should be on 395 and 146, and that's really why the warehouse is located where it is. It's next to 146 in the interchange because that's where the truck activity should be. It really needs to be. Our commitment really is to, as I mentioned, put turn restrictions on the driveway so that we don't have the trucks, you know, no right turn in, no left turn out, so we're focusing those trucks over to the interchange area. We can also make sure that anybody who's delivering to this facility or any trucking companies that are delivering here know what the proper travel route is, and, you know, we can specifically state in any of those documents that they are not to use Route 16 between 395 and 146 to travel to the project site, in either direction. So the turn restrictions of the driveway or something that we'll put in place, and then we can certainly make sure that we're informing the truck drivers that we do not want them using Route 16 through the center of town, because it's not appropriate for them to be doing that, not only just for our facility, but for any trucking activity that doesn't have a destination in the area itself. So I've probably gone on too long, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have now or later on.
Okay, thank you very much, Board.
Thank you.
Mr. Stevens?
Just to the chair, would it be possible for you to design alternative routes? If, you know, 2 routes, if you're going to go to Springfield, or 2 routes that you're going to go to Hartford, Connecticut, and be part of that. So not just saying, you know, that way there's something written saying, you know, for a tenant to go in there and say, okay, if you're going to go to Springfield, you know, you're going to go maybe up through Central Turnpike over to 395, we're going to go up to Mass Pike and then head over. Just so that that's kind of the alternative routes documented in the borough.
I think we can work on some documentation for that. We could include some schematic maps so you can actually see where that routing will take place.
Well, he's saying, I think maybe helpful, helpful to the truck drivers as well. Sort of give them a little handheld plan. So,
Yep, Mr. Zwicker.
thank you.
Through the chair. On the North Street Bridge, I think it would be wise to look into, we just did a project, Tri-Town, which is already going to have improvements going on at that bridge. So I understand that another study you guys want to do is great, but maybe review what was already done there and see what's already being done. There's no sense in saying you're going to improve the sidewalk and the sidewalk's already going to be improved, because we already agreed to certain major improvements in that area going on with that one warehouse. Now maybe, and if that's the case on your short-term improvements that you were talking about are already covered because of the other project, maybe the Davis and Northeast Street maybe double up on, or more improvements in that area where you don't have to do anything at the North Street Bridge because everything's already being done from the previous project. Another real major concern, and it's being done on the other project, and a few years ago we had the entrance layout for Pine, Sand, and Gravel. I see no turn-in lane here on Gilboa coming in, and you're gonna need it. You already stated how with the peak traffic and the whole 9 yards, if you're having all the trucks coming out off 146, you're definitely gonna have to have a turning lane there to come in onto the property site. But keep in mind on designing that, the Pine site we've already had a print in front of us for the entrance to that site, with the turning lane being involved in that site. So I don't know whether it's gonna be a continuation of making a center lane from your entrance all the way up to Pines, or what, so it's not piecemeal, but that needs to really be looked at, because that's been looked at, okay, by this board, and now you're coming in front of us, so it's gonna be I know, it's like a merger of these two projects that are definitely happening. And being a planning board, there's no sense in doing it once and then doing it all over again in another year. So get something like that and drawing and looked at. So, I mean, that would be a good start in some of them aspects.
Yeah, in addition to that, behind the Gilboa factory where Classic Envelope is, and there's land behind that that could possibly be developed too. That's industrial. It's kind of like a collision course.
I'm also gonna bring up on how many vehicles you're gonna plan on having in queue on 140, on Gilboa. I think we had 3 or 4 tractor trailers able to be in queue in the center of the road for the other project. And your warehouse is another 500,000 square feet, 400,000?
The other issue is when the tractor trailers are in the side lane going to the gas station.
Right.
And that's another issue.
Where they need to accelerate.
Well, no, they're parked.
You're gonna park it.
Yeah.
Just through the chair, I think it was one, they didn't do Jeff, but I think there was 3 going in the ramp to the gate on that Tri-Town project, and there was 1 for the turning lane in going into the facility. Okay, maybe 1.5, but to your point, Mike, I think, those, you see them down south and some other areas, those dual turning lanes, where it's in the middle of the road, we can turn left or right. That would be probably more ideal in a situation in the future of Pine, as well as this facility, is having that dual turning lane, or turn off lane.
Through the chair, I mean, that has to be really looked at, because like I said, that's already approved. We already gave a blessing on that, and that entrance, and where it's gonna be, and the whole 9 yards. And that was agreed upon with the turning lane, everybody knew it. And also on the traffic study, on the other project, I mean, on state peer review, the state even said, you gotta have a turning lane. So I know in a facility of this size, definitely you're gonna have to have one.
Just through the chair, I think you get a lot of road width anyways to look at and make it work there, because they're right there where Guilford's is, and that's pretty wide.
That's something we can take a look at.
Anyone else, board? Questions? No? Yeah.
We received grant money and we studied the road for the industrial development out of that project across the street. This is,
The connection.
so I can't remember exactly
The
what
street,
that entrance was.
the road
That line
connection.
was before that, so,
Yeah, we have all those files.
where Pine Sand and Stone is now, there's already a designed road for industrial development in that area after the pit is gone, so it's exhausted. I don't know, that's something you might want to look at, just so you know where that's going to be at the same time.
I think we've got a couple of drawings that show where that comes into Gilboa.
Okay.
So,
Like, Ken, through the chair, I think that's why they're taking down the hill. I think that general area where the entrance is gonna be, which isn't far, it's right here, so here, I think it's gonna be like right there.
and it's a little bit further out, but
Yeah, but basically, yeah.
Okay. Were there any talks about like an impact fee or donations to the town, like fire truck or anything that the project is gonna be? Is there gonna be a TIF? Any,
Yeah, I mean, generally, I run into this situation quite often, and obviously, to the extent that you guys can solicit that from us and make it a requirement as part of our approval to contribute to any type of fund, whether it be established or to be established, I'm open for it. If you can't solicit that, I can make a voluntary contribution. So the answer to that is yes.
Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
so I do that all the time, and, again, like I said in our first meeting, we want a good project here, we want something that everybody's proud of.
Mm-hmm.
That is something we do all the time, we just have to figure out the structure, so yes.
okay, thank you, I appreciate that. I have a lot of ideas.
I got just one more, through the chair. On your road going in, obviously, you said there's no location yet for your entrance shack. You're gonna have an idea of reason being is vehicles in queue, vehicles stuck, and then stuck.
Yeah, no,
not being able to come in.
it's gonna be up near that intersection that you're looking at, just because of the geometry of the road. So that road goes up a hill, and then it starts to flatten out as it gets near the top. So we wouldn't want to put that guard shack halfway up the hill and have them have to restart on there. So we want it up near that top.
And then to continue on that same conversation, where you're gonna be blocking the road, now it's gonna be blocking cars and trucks all at the same time, correct?
Well, I mean, there's an awful lot of trucks that can queue on that, coming up through.
And cars.
Okay.
Okay. Can we get a general idea how many vehicles you're gonna be holding in queue then in that driveway? Because by the traffic rate that you're showing in the mornings and all that, within a 1 hour window, I think it says it's 100 and something vehicles. You're gonna stop 100 and something vehicles right there first thing in the morning?
Well, the 100 vehicles aren't going to sit there for an hour.
I realize that, but
So they'll be let in through that guard shack, through that gate, as they show their credentials. So if it's the employees, they're going in there every single day. They don't, get your, whatever it is that gets them through there, whether it's a card reader. There are some of these facilities that have an automatic plate reader, and you just pull it.
but something to the chair, we'd like to, at least I'd like to see more information on that
Right.
aspect of it.
Yeah, there'll be an opportunity next time. There wasn't a schematic done yet of the view, right? Oh, you have something? Oh, okay, all right, okay.
You
So
asked me
let's,
that last time. You brought it this time.
oh, okay, all right, wonderful. So why don't we have you do that, and so the members of the audience can see.
Sure, thanks, Sharon. So last time, we'd shown a rendering of the building. It wasn't this specific project, it was another CRG project. We went back, they had this one prepared. This is for this specific project. It's the only rendering they've gotten done so far, but this is a corner view of it. Then what they did is they used a computer-generated model to set up the view of the pond. The only comment I had on this when I first saw it was, you don't actually get that view unless you're probably sitting in a kayak on the edge of that pond. So as you're coming down Gilboa, there's some vegetation, things in front of you. It really doesn't show up here. And just to make everybody aware, when I first looked at it, I didn't see it. So they superimposed this as well. So in the background here, you can see the topography, and then this is the building that's sitting down behind that berm. So when you actually look at it, this is a summertime view of what you'll see. You can see the building through the understory on some of these trees through here. Now, I noticed that I was coming in tonight, or late this evening, that this time of year, obviously the foliage is not on those trees. You will see through those trees, and you will know something's back there. You won't see a clear shot of it because there will be over 100 feet of trees that will remain in that up on the other side of Gilboa, but you will know something is back there. The other thing we talked about last time was what about from Northeast Main Street? What are they seeing, what are they hearing, things like that? So we have requested a sound study. The proposal came in this morning. We've executed it. It's going to be a little bit of time before that study's complete. They're thinking probably around the end of April. But just to start off, so what we did is we did a cross-section all the way through the site. So from Northeast Main Street all the way back out to Gilboa. The orange line that you can see here is where we cut the site. I didn't think you really had too much interest in seeing what it looks like in through the middle, so what we did is, so we could bring some detail up onto this slide, we cut it in half. So on this upper view, there's two cars on Gilboa Street, and this is at true scale. So if you're used to seeing profiles, cross-sections, things like that with the exaggerated scale, we didn't do that here, this is the true scale. So you've got a couple of cars down on Gilboa Street here. Here's that parking lot right in front of the pond. Then you come across the pond. Again, the topography rises up through, and then you get into our site development. So you've got the grading. It comes up along this edge. We're showing a couple of trucks on the roadway. Here's the parking lot, and then you come in and you have the building. Kind of the building right there on the side. I've just drawn the shadow line that comes up through the basic view shed. That's very similar. It's kind of a cross-section view of what I had just shown on the other sketches. So as you look through, you're kind of looking up towards that top corner of that building. So that's what you're seeing there. The Northeast Main Street side, we started, this is one of the houses over on Northeast Main Street. Over on Northeast Main Street, and then we cut down through the topography. It drops down here, comes back up, and then this is actually where our limit of work is, right where that red dot is, that we cut down into the gravel pit. Again, the roadway with trucks going along, we've got a parking access drive right in there, and then you get to the building from a couple of trucks down through here. So if they look out the back of that house, they're looking across this topography, they're actually going to look out across the top of that building. They wouldn't see it. You'd be looking right over it. Okay, these are shown with full mature trees, full foliage, but on this one coming on the lower section here, coming off Northeast Main Street, even if for some reason he decided to clear cut his lot all the way back to the lot line, which is right there, as you can see, with the topography, the way that sets down in that gravel pit, you're looking over the top of it.
Question just to the chair. What about Charles Street? Because you've got a solar farm where you're down in there, you can see right straight.
Yeah, I haven't cut a section up through there.
Okay. All right.
But we can do that next time.
You didn't ask that one. Thoughts
Yes,
about
but
that road?
In all fairness to him, you asked about the noise coming through the solar.
Okay.
But I was still asking about, yeah.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
yeah, until we get the noise back on that, I think maybe just plantings or something like that, or along the way.
To the chair, question. The fact that this is being generally built on a gravel pit, what percentage of the building is not defoliated? Meaning, how much of this percentage is being built on the sand or the gravel and not taking down forestation? Just on the right over there, some forest?
This right here,
Yeah,
that's some tree cutting right there.
okay.
All the rest of the building is in on either gravel or the side slopes that have been grassed.
I mean, it couldn't be more fortuitous. I mean, the fact to not have to deforest an area completely, it's like 80% gravel, 85 you're putting on the pit?
As far as the building goes, I'd
Yeah.
say it's more like 95%.
95, as far as the building goes, right?
Yeah, the tree line is also, it's up on this edge here,
Yeah.
and then it comes down through right there. around that way. All the rest of it, again, is in gravel, or they do the...
Is that the solar farm behind it?
Down here? Yeah.
So there's already that solar farm that we see from, so you don't even see behind the trees, right? From Davis.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
one last thing, in working with the sound folks, they're going to run their initial calculations, come up with what we have. We've talked to them about running a second set with sound barrier along this edge, and then one along about from here, about through here. And that really is in response to the, you mentioned the valley effect of the noise that's coming out of there. So they're going to run a couple of different scenarios for us, see what the difference is. The the first run may come back and say there's not going to be any noise coming out of there anyway, just because of the way it sits down in the pit. But in the event there is, that's the second one. That's what we would do there.
Okay, thank you.
And through the chair, the last meeting I had asked about for the snow removal of the trucks. You're planning on having a site or an area set up for that?
Yeah, they would go through the scraper systems. And there's a couple of different spots where that could be. Again, this is going to be totally driven by where the temperature will be.
Yep, no, I
But
understand.
the ideal locations would be along this stretch here,
Okay.
and then along this stretch around. And that's those overhead
Yeah.
scrapers,
Yep.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Anyone in the audience have any questions or concerns? And name and address, please.
Yes, I have a few questions.
Sure.
I live in Gilboa Pond.
What's your address
West.
and your name?
Oh, my name's Barbara.
Name and address?
88 Gilboa, 8688 Gilboa, the big duplex.
Okay.
I'm concerned with the exit and entrance out of the facility where you can only take a right. But say you're an employee and you live in Douglas Center, so you have to take a right out of the facility. What are you going to do? Turn around and shower to come back home? So my thought was, why can't you make the emergency exit for employees that want to take a left? Not trucks, just employees. And then with the three-way stop, I mean, they need those flashing stop signs, the solar panel. And I was thinking, you know how you go straight instead of taking a left over Charles Street Bridge? They could make that a one-way, so trucks can't come this way, you know, from here to where you take a left. You can only go up towards, you know, the church or whatever, but you can't come down. That would alleviate trucks cutting over and trying to sneak through and avoiding the center. And then, you know what I mean? Right?
Yep. Was that it?
That's a question.
Yeah, one more
If you could do that. I'm just like brainstorming. I've been there for 25 years.
Yeah.
Taking notes.
I also, like, when I moved here 25 years ago, they told me my children had to walk that sidewalk to go to school, and I petitioned where it's unsafe with all the trucks, so there's now busing. So my concern is for the children. My grandsons live actually on North Main Street, and them and their buddies ride their bike over Charles Street to go fishing. And that Charles Street is so dangerous. There's no sidewalk just to cross to get to I mean, there's no crosswalk to get to the sidewalk. And if you guys could, if this goes through, if you could put a sidewalk for the children so they could come home from after-school sports and go uptown and socialize without having to navigate this high volume of traffic, it would be wonderful.
Okay.
That's all. One more question.
Yep.
The trees, I live across, and I look at the trees. I know people drive by, probably don't, but I see, like I said, I see eagles living there. I see all kinds of extinct animals, and my concern is, I see the buffer with where you're putting the green grass down. Are you taking any of those tall evergreens down? Because the picture you showed me were trees, deciduous trees that have leaves, and there's none over there. They're all evergreens. So my concern is, are you cutting down all these beautiful evergreens to put trees in? Because that's going to disrupt the homes for this wildlife. That's all.
Thank you. I'll have the applicant respond to the trees.
Okay, I was going to say, there's a lot of questions.
Yes, there is.
So as far as the trees go, all around Gilboa Pond, there'll be at least 100 feet, if not more, of the existing trees left.
So what you see there
You're going
today.
to leave them there?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the traffic studies for the last development, Blackstone Logistics.
Is that the one on the other side of?
Yes, they went very in-depth in that intersection that you're talking about with the stop sign and the flashing and the improvements.
At the three-way?
Yes. So those improvements have already been voted on. They've been scrutinized, so what they have planned is what is moving forward there. And I don't know about the sidewalk, so.
In the crosswalk, because where I live in my neighborhood, there's a lot of children, because we've got those big homes, there's a lot of kids, and there's buses at 7 o'clock. I have, you know, you've got the elementary and high school from Douglas, but you've also got BBT that pick up kids, so the buses are stopping. Then you've got to consider the UPS trucks, the Amazon trucks that are delivering that park halfway in the sidewalk, halfway in the road.
Madam Chair, we'd be happy to do that. So as a condition imposed to our
You doing what?
approval, we'd be happy to do that. And
Fine.
just as long as...
Sidewalk?
Just as long as the right-of-way is,
Enough.
we have appropriate permission to do it inside the right-of-way, we'll do it to township standards, we'll be happy to do that. How many linear feet, do we know?
A lot,
How many?
a lot.
A mile?
No.
1,000 feet?
Which street?
Charles?
You just said you put a sidewalk there, did I just hear that? Oh, my God.
And again, well, a lot of these things, again,
Okay, all right, you guys.
What?
Hey, I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
He's going to
Ma- ma-
investigate the opportunity to do that.
well, no, Madam Chair, we're willing to do it if it's feasible. It's probably the township's responsibility to tell us whether or not it's feasible. A lot of times, we'd be happy to do a lot of things until a particular jurisdiction says you can't do things like that, right? For instance, I mean, I remember one time a township asked us to put a physical structure, an I-beam structure, over a road to physically stop trucks going down the road. We said, yeah, we would be happy to pay for that until the state DOT said, you're not doing that, right? So anyway, we're willing to do that
Okay.
as long as you tell us it's okay.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, anyone else have any questions or comments? We've got to move along on the agenda. Seeing none. Anyone online have any questions or comments regarding this hearing, 105 and 123 Gilboa Street and 470 Northeast Main Street? Seeing no hands. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, name and address, please.
Lucille Prince, I live at 1 4th Street. I know you're going to give instructions to the owners of the building and the tenants who have businesses there in terms of, you know, how they can access the highway and lessen the amount of traffic on the main road. Like, how is that going to be enforced? Like, I mean, like, if residents were to notice, you know, oh my God, you know, you can actually see them coming out and they're doing, you know, that, like, who would you talk to?
The zoning enforcement officer. So there's going to be a method that they can on-site control the queuing of trucks and their movement through the site and through the town. So if there's any complaints, that would go through the building department. The zoning enforcement officer would enforce the conditions of the permit.
The zoning, that's a town person?
Yes.
Okay, that's a department within the town right now?
Yes. Building department.
The building department right now?
Or community development, yeah. So that's where we're putting some safeties in so that that can be addressed if it becomes an issue.
Okay.
So we're trying to predict the issues.
Right.
Through the chair, also like trip data and stuff like that for trucks, and so we can pull laws and emission norms.
If I could have one more suggestion.
Sure, name and address, please.
You know where you guys are proposing to put a shopping center where the three-way stop is? You know?
No,
You know, like with Charles Street? I thought he said he was gonna.
No.
Oh, you're not?
no,
Okay.
no, doesn't mean, thank
Okay,
you.
perfect.
Okay.
All right, thank you
Do
so
you
much.
want to go, does the applicant want to continue to
Thank you so
April
much. You
28th
know, the girl is.
or April 14th?
Why don't we do April 14th?
Okay.
See what we have for information, if we have
Right.
nothing new, we can just continue.
Okay, all right. I'll entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to April 14th at 7 PM. Motion made by Mr. Sokrat, seconded by
You go past the back.
Mr. Marks. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good presentation. Very well. Traffic.
Yeah, I don't live-
Next item on the agenda. Yeah. Next item on the agenda, public hearing continued for March 10th, 2022, Sutton Douglas Development, application for definitive subdivision, Mumford Road and 5 4th Street. Possible votes. Oh. Good evening, Tim. Can you hear us? Oh. He is?
Mike used to go on.
Okay. Do you see Wayne on there? Do you see Wayne? Is he in the hallway? Oh, there.
There you go.
I called for you, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just
You're
in
late.
time.
We'll make this
Okay, good. Awesome.
That'd be good.
Tim fired up.
No, he's having technical difficulties, so that's why you're on. Name and address for the record.
Okay, Wayne Billett, Land Design Collaborative, here on behalf of Sutton Douglas Development.
Can you folks hear me?
There you go.
I'm so sorry about that, technical difficulties on Madam Chair, members of the board. I apologize for not being in person tonight. I hope to be there in person at our next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Excuse me, Tim, can you do a screen share? 'Cause it might take a few minutes. Thank you.
Whoever is hosting, would they mind allowing screen share?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Any
if you
need
could,
for a microphone, Madam Chair?
no,
Okay.
nope.
Okay, again,
You want to just give us your update
sure.
and progress?
Sure. Tim, as soon as you fire that up, I can. So
If you don't mind.
I'd like to do this through the presentation on the wall, Madam Chair. So again, Tim, can you go to the first slide, please? All the way up. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, folks, Wayne Bellick again, Land Design Collaborative, here with Tim Flynn on behalf of Sutton Douglas Development. So we had, if you folks recall, had discussed that at this next meeting we would discuss traffic and hydrogeology. So joining us tonight, what I'd like to do is give the board an update as to what's transpired with our group, the civil site, very brief, and then we'd like to turn it over to the hydrogeologist, who's Joe Campese from Corporate Environmental Advisors, CEA. He is the principal in the firm, PE, and a principal hydrogeologist and president of the firm. And then after that, we'd like to hand it over to the traffic consultant Tetra Tech, who's Courtney Sudak. She's also a PE and a project manager. Tim, next slide, please. So when we last met you folks, we have since done a few things. We've gone to the Sutton Planning Board on the 14th of March, opened the public hearing, and that was continued until April 11th after a brief presentation. On March 21st, we've gone before the Douglas Conservation Commission, opened the public hearing, presented, and that's now continued to April 5th. We want to have a brief presentation, very brief, on the community mailbox locations, and we'll enter into the hydrogeologic and traffic discussions. So Tim, if you could go to the next slide, please. So when we last left, there was a question raised about where are the mailboxes. So the next day, I went to the local post office, met with one of their senior people in there, I forgot the gentleman's name, met with him and discussed the potential locations. So they are looking at two locations, one at the along Road A, about 500 feet in at the loop, thank you, Tim, and the second one out at the end of Road B, up near Forest Street. They felt that by traffic circulation, that would be the optimal way to go. While I had done that, he had also suggested, I told him basically what we had done for these types of mailboxes. He said that there was one under construction over at Joseph Road. So I said, okay, I'll take a ride over there. I did take a ride over there, took a few pics, measured a few things consistent with what we do. And then also while I was over there, I did measure the pavement width, which was 24 feet. It looks like it serves like 19 houses. So with that said, that's about all I have for a presentation. So I'd like to hand it over at this point to Joe Campese, the hydrogeologist, and he can do his presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks. Thanks very much. Nice
for being here this evening. Happy to stop if there are any questions along the way. I'll try to move this along. We can go to the next slide. So what we're going to do is really try to address some of the concerns that were stated by residents related to the development, specifically related to the use, well, as part of the development, the fact that there are going to be private wells, there are going to be new septic systems, and the concern about construction potentially interacting with some of the springs in the area. So we'll get into that. We can go to the next slide. So the objectives of the study were to, number one, look at the adequacy of the aquifer, the bedrock aquifer, which supplies all of the water currently to the surrounding areas. Second, looking at whether or not the additional withdrawal of groundwater for the new homes would adversely impact some of the existing neighboring properties. Looking at whether or not construction activities might negatively impact some of the area and some of the underground springs, and also looking at during construction whether you might get a breakout, which could be a concern and could not eliminate, but could result in some adverse impact on springs. Next slide, please. There we go. So how we went about this, we did really four things. One, data gathering. Really that was to look at some of the, there's geologic studies, there are hydrogeologic studies, state, federal. There are also, in each of the towns, there's information. A lot of it's on the septic systems. The state has a database on all the private wells in the area, which is really great because you can, I had information on 97 wells within a half mile of the development. And then we take all that information, we integrate it, and we develop what we call a conceptual hydrogeologic model. Really that's understanding, how groundwater flows in the subsurface, how much is available, and how that is important for the new construction project. And then we try to look at and integrate the information to try to say, okay, well, what are the impacts from the new homes on the existing water supply? How do the septic systems interact? And kind of take a holistic view. Next slide. So once again, this kind of, I think, summarizes, some of the information that we gathered, including a site visit. So I thought it was important. So I'm a geologist, hydrogeologist, and it's always important to go out and look at the landform. How close is bedrock? How thick is the soil? And the good thing was I went this last fall, and at that time there was a road cut around most of the site where they had done a number of test pits for the perk test. So we're able not just to see the surface, but also the subsurface and what the materials are. We can go to the next slide. So what did we learn? So if you take about a half a mile radius around the site, there are over 100 homes within that area. You wouldn't think that there would be that many, but there are. There are over 100 homes. The soils in the area are typically 0 to 20 feet thick. There are some places that get further away from the proposed development where there is over 100 feet of soil on top of bedrock. The soils are glacial in origin, so most of the soils were laid down during the last major glaciation. And they range from everything from silty clay material to more sandy. And on this site, the materials are generally sandier materials, sandy loam. The bedrock is called the Situate granitic gneiss. And so the way to think about that is it's an igneous rock that has been reheated. So it's a metamorphic rock. Technically, they tend to be very massive. And what we mean by that is there aren't a lot of fractures. There aren't a lot of places for the water to flow. But what we find is when you have a unit that's that massive, you have these large tectonic forces, across regions and states, which do end up causing fracture zones. they tend to be lateral, and they tend to have some interconnectedness. The private wells in the vicinity that already supply water to homes in the area are anywhere from 125 feet to 600 feet in depth. And for those who know about water wells, typically a water well driller, they drill till they find sufficient flow. That's what it's about. And if it's 125 feet, great, because they don't want to have to go to 600. So you find that typically in this area, most of the wells are between 200 and 400 feet in depth. So most of the water within that bedrock unit that's used for water supply is recharged by two major surface water bodies, Whiten Reservoir and Stevens Pond. Those do provide regional recharge of groundwater. And, you know, we do find that obviously the private homes in the vicinity, they get their water from the bedrock aquifer. So it's an important source of water supply. Next slide. So if we think about this study area, you know, this map basically shows the area that we considered. And you can see Stevens Pond up to the north and Whiten Reservoir off to the kind of southwest. And the study area is kind of in the central part of this particular figure. We can go to the next slide. So the intent here is, this isn't a computer model, it's a conceptual model. It's for us to think about in, once again, in a framework. We try to think about, okay, you take this, in this particular instance, we decided to take a look at an area that was a mile by a mile square and about 500 feet deep. All right, so that's this block of material that we're looking at. We also consider that the cover is about 10 feet on average, particularly in the area where the residential development is proposed. In the surface materials, there is groundwater, but it's discontinuous and it's shallow. And it can't be used for water supply because it's not sufficient. We typically see that, therefore, that most water supply in the area comes from deeper private wells. So if we look at the development's about 75 acres for the homes. And if we look at the study area we looked at, it's about 574 acres. 5,000 feet in a side is about 574 acres. And that's 7.7 times the size of the development. So we assumed that about 100 homes within that study area, that mile by mile block, are already using the bedrock aquifer for their water supply. And if you think about when you have a private well, you're withdrawing, it's about 325 gallons per day on average for a home. The average, I looked it up, you can look up all these data now. You know, the average home in the area has, you know, a little less than 3 people. Just nature of statistics. And so then the net amount of water that is taken out of the aquifer is the water that's withdrawn, and then you have to basically subtract the water that goes to the septic system. So it's a little less than 100 gallons per day. That's typically what is used by a home. So what we've done here is we've tried to take a look at the inputs and the outputs, and then we go to the next slide, please.
Question for you.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So you're assuming that there's 100 gallons of lost water from
Correct. That's right.
the ongoing situation?
That's right, yeah, because there's some of it's consumed.
Per home, right?
That's right, yeah, exactly, exactly. And so that's going on right now with existing homes, right?
Do you account for, that's just the water being pulled from the ground as well as the water being lost? Do you account for then rainfall and snow?
Sure, absolutely. And in our study, we actually talk about more of those details. You know, there is a certain amount of water. We have about, I think it's about 48 inches of rainfall a year here. And then about a quarter of it will actually recharge into the ground. Some of it is lost because it It moves to these surface water bodies, lakes, the streams. A lot of it goes off through evaporation. Yeah. So what we figured out in looking at all these inputs and outputs is that the amount of groundwater available in the bedrock aquifer is 40 or 50 times more than what is needed for the existing 100 homes and the 31 new homes, just to give you an idea. So it's a ballpark estimate, because we didn't do a computer model, because that's a massive effort to try to do for any particular area, because they need a lot of detailed information to get accurate studies. So what we also figured out is that these are all 2-acre lots, and a typical private well will have anytime you start pumping the well, and a well will pump at 10 or 20 gallons per minute for very short periods of time. And that creates what you see in a bedrock aquifer because of the very few fractures, and those fractures are going to be 200 feet, 300 feet, 400 feet deep. When you start pumping, you get an influence over a fairly large area, tens of feet to hundreds of feet. But because you have the homes separated by such a distance, it's very unlikely you're going to even have overlap within the new development. And then the homes that are in neighboring properties are even further away typically. So we don't think there's much overlap, on a regular basis if you're pumping from these new wells. So we think that the addition of the 31 new homes will not cause excessive groundwater withdrawals and should not impact water supply on the neighboring properties. That's really one of the major findings.
Right, so if you could kind of touch on the concerns from the abutters.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's coming up.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it is, yeah. We can go to the next slide, please. So here what we do is we try to talk about what some of those concerns are. And we'll get to the groundwater next, but first was we addressed the septic systems. There was a concern about the new septic systems contaminating the water supply. So the perk tests were done, and what we found was that the material, once again, is very sandy loam, which is relatively ideal because it provides a good environment for the bacteria to do their job, to decompose the waste. If it was a very tight soil, sometimes you don't have enough transport of oxygen and/or water, so that things become too stagnant. So what we find is that it's a relatively ideal condition. Now there are some places in the development where the material might be thin. So certainly LDC and the other engineers are going to have to look at each property and decide whether there's an adequate, cover for the septic system. Some places it's up to 15 or 20 feet thick, and there's plenty thick. So the water supply, to look at each household, the water is going to come from 200 to 400 feet in depth, and it has no connection to the superficial materials. So in other words, you have a septic system up in the soils, you have water being withdrawn from 200, 300, 400 feet down, and there really is no direct connection. That water is coming from a large geographic area.
Excuse me, and
yeah.
By our 100 feet apart.
More than 100.
Yeah.
So if you figure each property is what, 2 acres?
I'm saying on a single property has to be, I think.
Oh, that's right. The septic system.
Separation. And for
I will tell you from a hydrogeologic standpoint,
a lot.
it really doesn't make any difference because there's no connection.
Right.
There's no connection. So we really don't think that there's a risk that the new septic systems will adversely impact either the current homeowners or the neighboring properties. Next slide, please. So there was a concern about disturbance to underground springs. And having walked this site, I will tell you, I can see some instances where we could intersect bedrock. That's certainly a possibility. So when you're doing excavation for utilities and for basements, there are some situations where you'll intersect that shallow flow zone. Now, in this kind of a site, the shallow flow zone is in the lower part of the sandy material, and there's always what we call a weathered zone in bedrock, or sometimes it's called regolith, upper, a few feet up to 10 feet thick. So that zone, the bottom part of the soils and the top part of bedrock is what you might intersect. And that's where you could find that there's some springs that, occur. And the primary issue, once again, would be, I think, utility corridor construction, and some basements may intersect that zone. What you'll find, though, is that tends to dewater pretty quickly because they tend to be, once again, very limited from a aerial extent. And once you drain it, that's the end of, that narrow water-bearing zone. So we think that there really is no risk that construction will intersect the bedrock aquifer and disrupt local groundwater supply because the actual zone where the water is coming from is usually pretty deep. Next slide. Okay, so, this is meant to summarize everything, our conclusions. The bedrock aquifer, once again, seems to exhibit very suitable characteristics for providing the required domestic needs for this new subdivision. The assessment that we did indicates that the new private wells will not adversely impact the abutters' wells. And once again, the third item here is trying to emphasize that we think the septic systems are going to be in a very good environment for doing their job and have really zero impact on groundwater quality. And so we also think that once again the potential for intersecting a seep or spring during construction is possible, but we believe that it's possible that these can be addressed through the construction effort as they're encountered. It's not going to be a widespread issue. It's going to be very limited, and it's going to be addressed at that time. It's virtually impossible to try to design for something you may or may not encounter.
And the slides will be uploaded to the website, the project website? Okay, for everyone's review. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Boyd, do we have any questions, further questions for him?
No, I have one kind of question.
Sorry about that.
Are you planning on having raised septic systems at these houses? Are you going to try to keep the ground area all the same? Or are you going to hide some raised systems?
I would think that and Wayne can jump in, but I would think in 90, 95, maybe even 100% that there could be subsurface.
Okay.
Yeah, there might be unusual. I think more likely you'll have a place on a property where maybe you have to move the septic system from where you proposed it because you'll have better characteristics and thickness in another area of the site. Yes.
No, just when the raised systems in the new development kind of stick out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Okay, the important traffic.
Yes. For the record, I'm Courtney Seagock from Tetra Tech, 100 Dickerson Road in Marlboro. Tim, can you go to the next slide, please? So we prepared a detailed traffic impact and access study for the project. We included a comprehensive set of intersections in our study area. As you can see from this graphic, we looked at 6 intersections, 4 existing intersections, and the 2 proposed subdivision roadway intersections. Next slide. As part of the study, we collected traffic volumes. These volumes were collected in July of 2021 when most of the travel restrictions were lifted, and they were also done during a summer condition, which is typically peak traffic volume conditions. We collected during the 7 to 9 a.m. peak period and the 4 to 6 p.m. peak period. That's industry standard for residential projects because that's typically when people are leaving for work and coming home from work. So as you can see, there's very light traffic volumes at these intersections. During the morning peak hour, there's generally less than 50 vehicles per hour at the intersections as a whole. So these are very low volume roadways, which per Astro Standards are roads that carry less than 400 vehicles per day. So next slide. During the PM peak hour, you can see it's very similar to the AM, no more than 50 vehicles per hour for the entire intersection volumes. And next slide. Once we have the existing traffic volumes as a base, we then can look at the future year conditions. So the future year conditions per Mass DOT standards, which is more than the nationwide industry standard of 5 years, is DOT likes us to use a 7-year traffic growth.
So basically, we developed a traffic volume growth percentage, which we based off of historical DOT volumes in the region, and we also compared it to other traffic studies that have been prepared for larger projects that were nearby, and we used a 2% per year growth rate. Those become the base volumes for the no build, and we did contact both the towns of Sutton and the town of Douglas to add on top of that general background growth rate any specific development projects that are planned or improved in the region. Then we look at our project's traffic volumes, and we apply them to the roadway network based on U.S. Census Journey to Work data for the town of Douglas. So that's specifically data from your community that has been summarized by the U.S. Census data. So this is specific to your locality, and we have about 50% of trips that will come to or from Mumford Road from the north. It was a negligible amount that would come to or from the south of Mumford Road. 30% would come to or from Torrey Road, and 20% come to or from Birch Street. Now, because there's two different connections for the neighborhood to the adjacent public roadway system, we then looked at the proposed layout for where all of the houses would be and came up with a distribution. So approximately 50 or 80% of the homes would use Duval Road, and 20% would access via Forest Street. Next slide, please. So we developed the trip generation estimates for the projects, and we used industry standard trip rates published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. That's the gold standard for estimating trips for most land uses, and single-family homes is one of the land uses that ITE has the most data points for. So everyone, pretty much when they're doing a traffic study for single-family homes, will use this data. And as you can see, during the morning peak hour, we estimate that the 31 homes will generate 23 vehicle trips. That's 6 entering trips and 17 exiting trips. Next slide, please. During the PM peak hour, there'll be about 31 trips. 20 will be coming in and 11 will be going out. So basically, this area will see an extra vehicle every approximately 2 or 3 minutes due to the project. And again, these trips are split between Duval Road and Forest Street to minimize the impacts to any one location. Next slide, please. So then we added those to our future year base volumes. And as you can see, the volumes are still very low. So there's still less than 50 vehicles per hour during the AM. And next slide, please. And the same thing with the PM. Next slide. So this is a summary of the AM peak hour, PM peak hour, and weekday daily trip generation. As you can see, during the entire day, there will be 294 trips. And again, those will be split between Duval Road and the access on Forest Street. Next slide, please. So then what we did is we conducted capacity analyses, which are looking at the intersection operations for delays. And we used Synchro software, which is industry standard capacity analysis software based on highway capacity manual methodologies. And levels of service A through F are the designations that you can get. A, just like grades, A is the best you can get, F is the most delay. So most communities consider LOS D or better. In the greater Boston area, even LOS E or better is okay, given that greater Boston out to Worcester is kind of more populated. But all the study intersections are level of service A, meaning they have delays of less than 10 seconds for any of the movements, which is great. And that's from the existing conditions all the way through the build conditions with the project. So this just kind of shows you going from existing to no build to build, and that the levels of service, or that the levels of service are A, so the intersections can accommodate the extra traffic. And next slide, please. And the next So this is the PM, I'm sorry, there's a typo, that's AM, but it's the PM, and the same thing, levels of service A throughout. So next slide. So really, there's not much that needs to be done to the existing intersections to accommodate the extra traffic because the levels of service are so good. But because Duval Road is a little bit windy and a little bit of a grade differential around the proposed driveway location, the applicant is willing to install advanced warning signage approaching the subdivision roadway from each direction. We're proposing a MUTCD W2-2 sign, which there's an example image of on the screen. And that's obviously subject to approval by the town of Sutton. Next slide. And then relative to the subdivision design, this slide here shows you Mass DOT and AASHTO dimensions for vehicles. So it gives you the different types of vehicles all the way from passenger cars and light trucks all the way up through the tractor trailers, like your WB67s, which are what you see coming out in and out of industrial, shipping buildings. So it gives you the vehicle width and the operating width. The operating width assumes an extra foot on each side of the vehicle so that mirrors don't clip each other or anything like that. So what the guidance suggests or recommends is that the roadway be designed to accommodate the design vehicle, which is by and large, the primary vehicle that's going to be using roads. So an industrial roadway, you should design for big trucks. For a residential neighborhood, that would be passenger cars. So we need an operating width of 9 feet for each direction. Next slide. And then the AASHTO standards, which again are the gold standard for roadway design, has minimum recommendations for cross-section width. So that's the travel lane plus any shoulders. For both, if there's 2 directions, then it's the bi-directional. If there's only a one-way road, it would be half of these. So since the project is going to generate under 300 vehicles per day, it would fall under the under 400 vehicle per day category that you see on the screen. And you can see for the various design speeds what the minimum required cross-section would be. And assuming, basically anything under 40 miles per hour, the minimum should be 18 feet, which, again, would accommodate the 9-foot operational width for the primary vehicle. And I think that's it, Sam, right, for the traffic? Yeah.
Did you review anything for the construction of the project, occupancy for the neighborhood? So that was a concern from the abutters.
Oh, yeah, we haven't done a traffic or truck route evaluation for construction, but, we'd be happy to talk to the applicant about
like the construction vehicles, the heavy equipment through the, aged neighborhoods, the surrounding neighborhoods, maybe signage, mitigation. I think that was a concern from the abutters, including the well and the septic issues, so.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, we can definitely work on that for you. We do those for large-scale construction projects, so.
Yeah, it's a big concern,
Yeah.
the abutters.
Oh, understandable. Yep.
So, question to the chair. Your traffic study that you based off of was in July of 2021. Did you add in the COVID factor to those numbers, which is supposed to be 30%?
Or 11%. I think that was
30.
So for this part of the state, during the week the counts were conducted, we used the Mass DOT COVID dashboard, and the traffic volumes are within 10% of what they were in 2019 for the same week. So we didn't apply one here, but we could. But the volumes are so low that even if we applied a 30%, it still wouldn't bring you beyond, into even LOSB operations, because the existing volumes are so low to begin with.
I get what you're saying with the 18-foot width, because you got 40-foot trips and you're trying to maintain a lower speed on the roadway. I don't think we've approved a road width of 18. But
I think the
see your logic
proposed
behind
is
it.
20.
Yes, but I think what they designed is.
So basically, all we were looking to do here, Madam Chair, was just to demonstrate that the road widths that are being proposed more than satisfy the ASHTO requirements.
Yeah, these are
Yeah, I
the
appreciate that.
absolute minimums. And so, yeah, they're several feet above that. So there should be a comfort level for drivers passing each other.
So, just last question. So you mentioned that your traffic study mentioned that 20% of the traffic's going to be offloaded onto Forest Road.
Yes.
So, which is, I think we would expect something to those numbers as well, if not slightly higher. But what would that road width there is very small. Is there a width?
It's variable, he's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it is an existing roadway, so this more applies to, like, it does apply to existing roadways too, but that is existing. And Tim, if you can go back, please, to the build traffic volumes. So you can see in the peak hour, there's going to be 6 extra trips due to the project through that neighborhood scroll to the PM feed. Oh, yeah, 6 in both. So 6 in both, I'm sorry. So that's about 1 extra car a minute. So I wouldn't consider that enough to have an impact on, travel conditions on Forest Street.
Yeah, so we would want to take a little bit of a closer look at the impacts, especially on Forest, but you'll hear from the abutters, their concerns. Sure. Board, anyone else have any questions, traffic questions? Mr. Zwick?
To the chair. If I may ask, so what's your actual, I'm going to go first.
Okay, all right.
What's the actual road width that you're going to be having?
Madam Chair, we're looking at the main access drive at 24 feet. And we were looking to do the cul-de-sac and Road B, max access drive, the road. In Road B and Road C being the loop road and the cul-de-sac, we're proposing that at 22 feet, if the board would entertain that.
Okay.
What about Road
22.
Road D, that's a good question, Madam Chair. We had initially looked at a 22-foot up in there. However, based on the input that we received by the public safety officials, it was their preference that be 24 feet. I did indicate to them that in looking at the road widths in the Forest Street subdivision, they do vary between 17 and 19 feet. I did find a couple areas where it was 20 feet plus. However, recognizing the narrowness of those roads up there, we said that, perhaps a 24-foot would work to give them the proper turning radii to go on and off the streets.
Yeah,
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So through the chair, I still would like to see 24 throughout. With the trucks, the delivery trucks, everything that's going on today, everybody wants everything brought to their house. Because in the wintertime, and I respect your numbers, but when there's snow on the ground, your road shrinks. Ernie, you plow the roads all the time, you know it. And you're not talking inches, you're talking feet. They shrink. So I don't care how wide you say you're gonna plow, nobody with a plow is gonna go kiss a curb, rip the plow apart, so the roads are gonna be narrower all winter long. On the mailboxes, are there gonna be turnouts for the mailboxes?
Yes.
So you're gonna have the turnouts with lighting and the whole 9 yards there?
Yes, Madam Chair, we're looking at, these turnouts are going to be roughly 8 foot wide, so the vehicle can pull off to that side. Then we'll have, the length of it are typically around 40 feet. And so he'll be able to pull in and then continue. What I found out from the individual at the post office, which I wasn't aware, that the letter carriers get paid over the distance they travel, which, had I known that, I would not gone into this line of work. So they have, what he said is that in this particular case, they could come in, he said they would service through Sutton or Douglas. He said what would probably happen here is it'd come in either from Duval Road
service that mailbox, turn around and go back out, or more than likely, service that one and drive up to Douglas and then continue out, or vice versa.
Another point I'm gonna bring up is, on the mailboxes, we had it happen before, the houses and everything was starting to be built, people bought their lots, and all of a sudden mailboxes popped up, and they're like, why is it on our property? So this kind of be all laid out before these lots are sold, so people understand that they're gonna have a mailbox in their front yard, which you.
The centralized mailbox to let the person, whomever it is, at that lot.
Sure.
Know that there's gonna be
Yeah.
They had told before.
So I can only appreciate what you're saying. So I would defer to Tim. So Tim, that will be Tim's job to let these buyers know that there is a centralized mailbox location. Yeah.
And with the school, is the school gonna be stopping at one road to pick up everybody in that neighborhood? Does anybody know? Or the school bus gonna go through this whole area?
So Madam Chair, we haven't discussed that with the school system yet, but I know there was some discussion as to whether or not the kids would go up to Forest Street or down to the intersection of Duval and Road A. The discussion that we had is it will more than likely go through the subdivision, will be no different from any other subdivision. Pulling into the subdivision, gathering kids at a central gathering point, perhaps along Road A, they use the main spine road, and more than likely come in along the spine road, pick kids up at the intersection of Road B, and perhaps at the intersection of Road D, and then continue on.
So, to go back on my point on road width, I don't know if you travel out here in the wintertime, but there'll be a row of cars for all the kids to be sitting there, to get on the school bus with the snowbanks. Now, how are you gonna get by?
So through the chair, I made a comment which may have been a little snide last time I was here, but I'll repeat it. I think there's a way to properly plow a street and improperly, and not, with all due respect, I've seen it done. And I've seen the narrow roads, and I've seen roads properly plowed.
Okay,
So, we have a
let's move on
24-foot
from the road
Yeah.
width, and, because we're tick-tockety.
We're ticked off, yeah. But if it was on your light there, maybe they could
What?
open the road up a little. Well, because cars have to park. I'm with you.
20 feet.
I know.
There ain't gonna be 20 feet.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
I'm gonna open it up to the audience, so if we could just stick with different concerns from each person, and I think the gentleman behind you was first, so I'll entertain him, name and address for the record.
Morning, Madam Chair. Paul Maynard, 59 Duval Road, Sutton. The butter on both sides of the streets, both 59 and the proposed A. I'm going to just ramble a little bit, and you can answer, take whatever I have to say, or say nothing. 80% of the traffic onto Duval Road, brand new road, asphalted November last year. Forest Street, I'm not gonna say another word.
I will. I will.
You don't have to.
All you say.
It's all right here. School buses, I didn't hear a word about school buses traffic.
You just talked.
From the traffic engineer. Sutton, Douglas, VVT, two special need buses, and you have 2 daycares on that street that do not run in the summer on those dates. Duval and Mumford Street, I didn't hear a thing about that. Try to take a turn with a tractor trailer going west. And what is your sight line? Check it out.
There's no distribution center.
1 second, sorry.
That's adding 300 trips to Duval Road. Brand new road. Ernie, I think you know where I'm coming from. Been there a long time. I understand building. This has got me a little upset, to the point I've put in my points to Sutton And if my vote comes up, I think you know what it might be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
Did you
for your
have
time.
a specific question that you wanted addressed, or do you want just like the intersection, the sightline reviewed at Duval and Mumford, the daycare, traffic count?
The intersection, that's a problem.
Okay.
They
At
come-
Duval and Mumford?
Yes, they
Okay.
come up the hill
And sightline?
and there is no sight line.
Okay.
And
And
then
that's
when you-
entirely in Sutton?
And
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
all sight.
Okay, so that would be, I'm sorry, applicant?
I'll let you finish that thought, Madam Chair, and then I'd like to weigh in on.
That should be addressed through the Sutton Planning Board. Right? You
If
guys
it
just
has,
had a
it will
meeting
be.
on the 14th? was
I'm
it?
just coming to give you people some insight on this
Okay,
also.
all right, thank you, thank you.
So if I may, just for the benefit of your board, Madam Chair, we have discussed with the town of Sutton, that particular property is under a conservation restriction along that section of the roadway, which we were basically told you can't touch that. State conservation restriction. However, what Mr. Flynn and Tim, you feel free to weigh in, what Tim is offered is that if there needs to be any improvements down there in terms of adjusting or correcting for lines of sight, there are some trees on the street side of that stone wall down there that maybe some vegetative maintenance in there to open up those lines of sight could occur. I believe that if you look at the stop sign in that area and the approach to that intersection, I think the stop sign perhaps could be better positioned as well, and that's something we can discuss with Courtney. So there are a couple things that I think can be done in that area. There are constraints, like I said, that property looking to the left, we can't touch that. We can't touch beyond the stone wall. If Tim had an ability to do that and thin out that vegetation, I'm sure he'd be happy to do that, but he can't because of the conservation restriction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Miss?
Yes, Madam Chair, through the chair, to Wayne's point, the only reason we know that it's restricted land is that we looked into what our potential options were.
Yeah.
So we've already been in active discussions, and vegetation, maintenance, and signage is two major pieces that will play a factor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Miss?
Hi, Lynn Rosat, 50 Conservation Drive in Douglas. I don't know if this is an appropriate time, Madam Chair, but if we could have a little clarification. I know at the March 10th meeting, Sutton Douglas Development had spoken about a possible waiver for a couple of the smaller streets from the width of the road, from 24 to 22 feet. And there were concerns about that, and as just brought up recently about, the snow removal and all.
Yeah, there wasn't a required waiver, though. It's not in our regulations for a paved width. So we did discuss it, and Mr. Benoit confirmed it is not in our regulations for paved width. For right-of-way width, they are meeting the requirement.
So even with, taking into consideration what, was talked about snow removal, and keeping in mind that I believe it was 3 years ago, the town of Douglas got #1 snow removal in the state of Massachusetts. So I think the removal is amazing, just saying.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
But one of the things that kind of, the expression rubbed me the wrong way when Wayne was talking in the March 10th meeting was that, granted, Conservation Drive is losing 100+ acres of what was supposed to be conservation land gifted to the town, and as we all know, or most of us, that someone dropped the ball. I would very much like to know at some point who, what group, what board, or whatever.
Not this applicant.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely not.
Right, so they hear the concerns with the roadway width, so it is their project, so.
But what concerned me was his statement, and I believe this is accurate, and you, Madam Chair, had responded when he said about possible waivers, and now I understand that. Then you brought up, which I thought was excellent, that at that point, the 55 acres that were, was being set aside for walking trails and what have you, it was contingent upon the town voting, for the waivers. So now I know that's a moot point, but that was what I was basically trying to clarify. It just, to me sounded like, okay, well, we'll do for you, you do for us type of thing, which is fine if it's all, cohesive. But you did bring up the point that then if the town didn't support the waivers, what would happen? And before he was able to respond, which, good for you, bad for him, you said, well, then you could build on that property. And I believe he stated at that point, yes, but not all of it, due to conservation issues. All right, so it's basically clarification.
Okay.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That was
Thank
good.
you. Okay, anyone else in the audience? Yes, sir.
You've already heard it a lot, but I'm going to say it again. I live on 1 Forest Street in Gary Prince. Been there 35 years. I plow snow myself, not for the town of Douglas, but I do plow. And on Forest Street, many, many, many times, it's one width with the snow, where you have to back up to let another car go by, just for our few houses that are there now. And with this many more houses and more traffic, it's going to be a huge problem. It happens all the time. It happened this winter with a little bit of snow.
The applicant is hearing the feedback, and I'm sure they will
And one
consider
other
that.
question about the
Yes.
mailboxes.
Yeah.
You said there's going to be mailboxes up on the corner there by Forest Street. Is that going to be right in the corner, or is that going to be down the road a ways?
I'm unsure of the location, exact location. Yes, applicant.
Madam Chair, I think I can answer that. So in speaking with the postal individual, he suggested that the mailbox actually be located on Forest, not on Forest, but on Road D. So it will be off of Forest, so he will be turning onto Forest, onto Road D from Forest, servicing the mailboxes and then continuing through, or vice versa, coming back the
Are
other
you
way.
going to revise the plans to show the locations?
Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, as you know, we're going to be subject to the peer reviews. We'd like to make one set of revisions, and those will be probably incorporated.
Just for the
Yep.
abutter?
Yep.
That they will be shown.
Would that be close to the corner or down the road a ways?
Through the chair, that would be closer to the corner. And if I could take it one step further, if you recall, Madam Chair, at the Concom hearing, Mr. Prince's wife had raised a question about the area of clearing. Just for clarification with the board, the mailbox location is not going to require any clearing of those trees in that area. That was of concern to the Princes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
May I say something on, just very quickly, Madam Chair? Is there a consideration, and I understand what you're saying, if I'm a person picking up my mail down by Forest Street, I'm going out Forest Street, or I'm coming in Forest Street to pick up the mail. If we were to not do the 2 sets of mailboxes and put one more locally within the project itself, that has all the mailboxes, will keep those people at least neutral from wanting to go out to Forest Street. You know what I'm saying, is that if this becomes, we're hearing the public, I'm just trying to have a centralized mailbox for this development, then that will eliminate some traffic going down Forest Street if you don't have to go down there to get your mail. So just a thought, sorry.
Very good idea.
Madam Chair, I think that is a good idea. The number of mailboxes out here was not dictated by the team. I'm sure the client would appreciate only paying for one. This was the USPS and their preference. I would tend to agree. I mean, if you could just have one in a central.
It's not, through the chair, it's not their decision.
No.
The postmaster is the one who makes that decision, but tells you when to put it.
Not at all. Yes.
So we don't really have a control.
Through the chair?
Yes.
If the board would like, I could try to approach them again.
Okay, one more. They are the ruler
Yeah.
of the mailboxes. I don't, it's not in our purview.
I get that. I'll have a conversation with the postmaster.
Okay.
I'll have a conversation with him.
All right, thank you.
Through the chair, it's worth one shot to see if
Yeah.
maybe we would agree to a central.
Okay.
Through the chair, it's something we'll definitely explore and discuss further with the postmaster.
Thank you. Anyone online, questions or comments regarding this hearing? Yes, miss?
Oh, Lucille Prince at 1 Forest Street.
Yep.
In Douglas, Madam Chair. I just have a follow-up question regarding the traffic. One of the figures that you had mentioned, 80% is expected to use Duval Road. Was that with construction or was that post-construction?
Through the chair, that was post-construction. That's what the 31 homes will generate on a day-to-day basis once they're occupied.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so post-construction, when there are 31 houses already built and everybody's living there, if we don't get a centralized location for the mailboxes, that's going to direct a lot more traffic into Forest Street and Belvoir, because most of the houses are like in Douglas anyway. And, you know, if there is a post office box set up, you know, on that road, granted there'll be trees and stuff, but there'll be a lot more cars, a lot more vehicles stopping, a lot more noise. You know, our bedroom is right there. You know, I wouldn't want to see lighting there. We don't have any lighting right now. You know, that would still be a concern, so.
If the applicant wants to reply.
Madam Chair, I'd like to respond to that. So as part of the discussion with this postal employee, their question was, what's the traffic distribution? I said it's 80-20, and they felt that even with the 20%, it was worth having something in that area. I'd be, again, as Tim suggested and I did, I'd be happy to pick up the phone or go visit these folks again, express the concerns and say, would there be a consideration?
Okay, yeah, you can report back
Okay,
to us
thank you.
on your findings. Thank you. Miss?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay. Miss over here? Yes, name and address, please.
Carol Lincoln, 13 Forest Street. I just want to clarify with the young lady. As far as I know, from what she said, there's 290 more trips per day. 20% would be on Forest Street, which would add an additional 1 car per minute.
Yeah, I did.
Through the chair, the 290 cars per day is over 24 hours. What I was referring to were the peak hours. So the bulk of the hour with the single most amount of traffic in the morning and the hour in the evening that will likely experience the most amount of traffic is what we look at as a conservative measure to say, okay, if we look at the most impactful time periods, which is typically during the commuting periods for residential neighborhoods, what will those impacts be? And during those peak hours, it will be 23 to 31 cars per hour, which equates to about 1 car every 2 to 3 minutes. On a daily basis, it'll be much more spread out because that's over 24 hours. Does that make sense?
Yep, makes sense because I had estimated about 60 more trips a day. And currently, I believe on Belvoir, there are 4 homes. On Forest, there are 8 homes. And on Fairfax, there are 4 homes, which is a total of 16 homes, not a lot. Which means that we have a total of 32 trips a day. So we are doubling, tripling the amount of cars that are going through the neighborhood. If I got that right.
Through the chair, we did collect volumes at the residential neighborhood streets. Actually, Tim, do you still have the presentation available?
Madam Chair, she does not have to bring it up, but my point is that I am asking, since we are more than doubling the amount of traffic that's going to end up going through the small subdivision, that most of us have been there for quite a long time, and we understand that this is going to happen, I would just like to make one request. I would like our roads paved.
Okay. The applicant can discuss with the owner. And then I don't know if the number that you came up with, the 32 is, or 36 is correct. No, 32 trips per day. I'm not sure if that's correct.
It might be more, because we have some people
I'm
like.
sorry.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Lucille Prince, 1 Forest
No,
Street.
I'm sorry. Let the traffic engineer, please.
So through the chair, the way the traffic works is, how do I explain it? It's not all of the houses generate 2 vehicle trips per day. When you look at data for a lot of single-family home neighborhoods, they don't generate, 4 trips per day. It's a function of different factors. So we did collect data for that entire neighborhood, which I think was on par with what the per house would generate for the proposed neighborhood.
I guess my point simply is that it is going to be a substantial amount more. And I happen to be the one that's at the intersection of all of those roads.
Right, so I think they're gonna look at the off-site impacts also with the butter
Yes, share the detailed
concerns.
traffic study did evaluate the intersections along Torrey Road, and the impacts were very minimal from an operational standpoint, meaning how much extra delay are they going to cause vehicles trying to exit out into the public roadway system. And most, and like I had said before, most communities consider level service D or better, which is, on the order of 30 seconds or so delay for unsignalized intersections. And here, where the intersections are currently, and even with the project, will experience delays of less than 10 seconds per car. So,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I know there's going to be an opportunity for some more follow-up and information to try to mitigate any off-site impacts. So I'll entertain a motion to continue.
All right. May I add one thing, please?
Sure.
Madam Chair? Thank you. Just because the Open Space Committee forwarded me some correspondence, they made a vote at one of their recent meetings to suggest to the developer for consideration of a trail network to connect with the open space property. The only reason I want to bring this up is because the Open Space Committee made a motion to discuss this. I do have some reservations about the idea as a whole, and I believe this board may have discussed this in previous years at some point, possibly when the 110-acre parcel was considered for donation 20, 30 years ago, whatever that was. There are a couple of narrow pieces of this property, one of them that connects to, I believe it's Conservation Drive, one that connects to Mumford. They're like 20 feet wide. The idea was to have a trail network that connects those two areas. My biggest concern there being, where do you park your cars and how do you access these trails unless you live there? So those are my primary concern. I'm not trying to look for answers or start a robust discussion on this, but I just wanted to let you know that the Open Space Committee was asking us to look into it, and I plan on discussing at least this in some regard with the developer at some point in the future. Whether or not this comes to anything, not sure, but I just wanted to bring it to our attention.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we run into that issue also with conservation land.
Sure.
So that's been an ongoing thing for preparing that little parking area and safety signage, all that stuff, so.
Thank you.
It's nice to have the land, but if you can't get at it, what good is it?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So I'll entertain a motion. Applicant, are you requesting April 14th or 28th?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
April 14th.
I'll entertain a motion, 7:30, yeah.
I'll make a motion to continue the Douglas development to April 14th at 7:30.
Motion made by Mr. Stevens, seconded by Mr. Sokra. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you on the 14th.
Much appreciated, thank you.
For your time.
Okay, we have a couple things to sign, and I'll pass that around. Mr. Benoit.
Sure, I'll try to rifle through this, but
I need to go, so.
understood.
To count the cars that go by my house every day.
Updates along the agenda, Madam Chair. We did have a peer review consultant check out Stonegate Development, conduct a site walk for public road acceptance. Those are not going to make it to town meeting warrant in the spring, but we have started the process on that.
Okay.
The board had asked at our February 24th meeting, I believe, to request an update for the 202 and 206 Maple Street subdivision. Our concerns were we had a negative balance in the peer review, the inspection account for the 53G. That was replenished.
Excuse me, miss, I'm sorry, we're still in our meeting, so I cannot hear Mr. Benoit talking.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that 53G account was replenished. The other thing I was looking into was the bond. The bond is legitimate. It's a tri-party agreement with an insurance company. It is legitimate, however, it was never recorded. So Mr. Cosma and I are getting his signatures on the original documents to get that on record. But otherwise, my questions were answered. He does intend on doing more work this summer. This project expires in September of 2022, so we will be conducting work or asking for an extension. Gilboa Court extension, we also did a bond estimate site walk with our peer review consultant, as we had discussed previously. I did receive the estimate today, but had not gone over that yet. Our item 6 under staff updates, letter C, zoning amendments or public hearings have gone out. Those will be scheduled for our next meeting, April 14th. And I do have, we have the 2 decisions, I believe, are being passed around for signatures. The only other 2 things I have, Madam Chair, is I made edits to our Thursday, February 10th and our Thursday, February 24th meeting. If interested, you could have motions to approve as amended.
Just this one?
Both, the 10th and the 24th of February.
Okay. Sir, are you here for anything specifically? Okay.
You like hanging with us, right?
Yeah, I just like hanging with you.
Oh, okay, all right, good. Just, I didn't want to miss anyone. I've done that before.
Madam Chair, I want to bring something up, if we can, to get into our bylaw or whatever, road widths. We need to get this hammered out.
It's a great point.
So we need to get something hammered in black and white, because the yin and yang that's going on about road widths, I don't like it.
Okay, so it's on our list of things to do.
Please?
Do we want someone to entertain a motion to accept the 2 meeting minutes as amended?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Stevens made the motion.
Second.
Mr. Greco made a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Stevens made the motion to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Sokrat. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.